part of animal control, we respond to orphaned or injured wildlife throughout the county, and all of the humane officers are certified for wildlife rehabilitation. So when the animals do come in, if they are on our license and we are able to house them here and get them back out to be released, we do so. We take them all in. We do basically a triage. If they're not on our license, we would get them to an appropriate facility that handles that licensed animal. We work very closely with Cooley Wildlife Rehab Center. They're out of Chaseburg, Wisconsin, just a little bit south of Lacrosse. They've been wonderful to work with for several years, and I've formed a very close bond with them as far as getting animals to them. They bring them back to us to be released, and they have helped us develop our program so that we can house and add more animals to our license. Being the only rehabilitator in Lacrosse County and on this side of the state, other than Cooley Wildlife, we accept animals from all over, other than across state lines. Wildlife cannot be transported across state lines without DNR approval and permits. So we do get animals. I just recently got one from Eau Claire. We get them from Chippewa Falls, from Toma area. Down south is, Prairie du Chien have brought animals up here. So we do get them from all over. So sometimes we are quite overwhelmed with wildlife in the small facility that we do have. Our program has really outgrown our space tremendously, and a lot of the supplies we either try to put them on our wish list to get some donated. The education coordinator has put a list out to places that she goes, which has helped a lot. The college students and stuff have donated. A lot of it, most of it comes out of our own pockets because there's not a budget created for our wildlife program. Animal control is contracted to pick up these animals, but they're not contracted to care for the animals. So the only contracted portion is the city of Lacrosse gives us basically a stipend, so much per year, and it doesn't matter how many animals we bring in or what the care and cost are. They just give us X amount of dollars per year. Otherwise, we're reaching out to volunteers, donors, staff members to help support the program. We take in everything. This winter we got in, there was a woman that brought in a toad. It had a sore front foot, was not hopping around like it should. She was worried with the cold weather that it was not going to be able to dig down to hibernate. So we get anything from toads, frogs, pigeons, falcons, hawks, owls, eagles, possums, multiple raccoons, hundreds of ducklings. I've got adult ducks now. We get a variety of migrating birds because of the Mississippi River. It's a huge migration pattern that goes over this area. So a lot of animals that are migrating either in the springtime or the fall that we typically don't see year round. We get them because of, due to some, either they've flown into something or landed on something that was frozen. A lot of the ducks, they see water on pavement and they think that it's a lake, and they are not able to safely land. So we get a lot of these birds that we never see, which is kind of a unique part of what we do. But on the other hand, we don't have the right products to care for them or the right food to feed them, so we try to transfer them on right away. Every animal that comes in goes through an evaluation. They get weighed. Weighing is an important part, so you can tell that they're improving in their health. So we try to weigh everything that comes in on the first day of intake. There are certain foods that are required by certain animals to give them the best health. Sometimes you don't realize, I wouldn't think when you see a squirrel, everyone thinks of feeding it nuts, but actually nuts are the worst thing for squirrels. They're still in their diet to give them the proteins and everything, but many of the squirrels just don't find nuts in their natural diet. They love cilantro, which I found fascinating, and greens. I really didn't expect squirrels to eat so much vegetables, but cabbage and the cilantro and spinach, greens, is a daily part of their diet. But every animal gets a specialized diet to give them. The possum, organic applesauce, again, fresh broccoli and cauliflower. It's got canned cat food, sardines. They need high amounts of calcium, so we add supportive minerals and calcium to their diets. The ducklings, at different stages of their growth, their food is changed. So when they come in, they get a duckling starter food, and then they go into the bigger grains as they get a little bit older, and also greens, cut up kale and spinach and peas and greens like that, mealworms. Because they do pick up insects and that, so we have to provide that type of protein to the ducklings and everything. When the raptors come in, again, we first evaluate them. What is their injury? If it's a wing injury, we would wrap the wing. Most of them are a wing injury that we see, so we would get them to the vet, have x-rays done, do the appropriate wrapping. Some of the hawks and falcons we get in are very emaciated, so we may have to tube feed them. So we have a special mix that we would mix up, warm it up, and then we would have to tube feed them to make sure that they get all the proteins and stuff for the first few days, so that they can use all of their energy on not digesting their food, but to going to wherever their injury is. So we always try to give them even baby food. We always keep a supply of baby food. That way they're not burning up their energy digesting meat to survive on. It's already basically just liquefied, and they don't have to burn up that energy. And as they get a little bit stronger, we may cut up some of the pieces of food and hand feed them again, so they just don't have to burn up any extra energy. They can just focus on healing. And then once they start taking it from us on a regular basis, we'll just introduce them to the whole foods and let them eat more naturally. If we weren't here to help the public, either they would be told to just leave it be and let nature take its course. We understand that. I have a hard time if I know about something that I want to be there to try to help it, as long as we're able to either do it here or to transfer it on. We would refer them to call the DNR to try to reach out to some other potential rehabilitators if we're not able to care for the animal, and in hopes that they're able to move it on to another rehabilitator. Make sure that you know that it is absolutely injured or orphaned before you attempt to bring it in. Many animals, their natural instinct is to be left alone and hide. They don't need to be brought into us. Mom is there somewhere keeping an eye out for them. So just make sure before you attempt to bring that animal into us that you know. We have great resources on our website. We're always willing to talk to somebody over the phone. Our front staff has been trained on how to handle a lot of the wildlife calls, just to make sure that the animals don't need to needlessly be brought into the shelter. Community support has always been great for our shelter, and moving forward now and expanding our wildlife portion of it, again, we'll be reaching out to community support, and it is so needed for our shelter. Because we could not do it without the funding from the community. There's no budget for it in contracts. The shelter is designed to house the domestic animals, so it's the wildlife part that all the rehabilitators in the state and throughout the states are basically funded by the rehabilitator themselves, and either grant money or support from the community. We do have a small budget that we've set aside in the shelter funding to try to help with our wildlife, but again, all the shelters are designed for domestic animals, and the rehabilitators, they're just taken out of their own pockets. So any support is always welcomed. This year, I know we've taken in right around the 1,000 mark, which is typical. You know, sometimes it's a little higher than that, sometimes lower. But I know we're at least a minimum of 1,000 at this point. Maybe 1,100. That's average. But I think once we have a better facility and a bigger facility, at least housing them and don't have to transfer them on, our numbers will only increase. We are looking at building possibly 4 raptor mews, which are the housing for the hawks, owls, the falcons, animals like that. And what that is when they get to a certain point, if they come in with a broken wing, they're kept in smaller kennels until that wing is healed. Once it is partially or mostly healed, it will go into these mews, which gives them more room to be active, but not so much room that they will re-injure their wing or foot or whatever the injury might be. So these raptor mews would be to house them until they're healthy enough to go into the flight cage. And the flight cage is where they would be exercising to build up their strength prior to release. These raptor mews are also critically important, especially during the winter months, to acclimate the animals to the colder weather. Right now they're being housed indoors, so we cannot just take them when they're healthy enough to be released and push them out into the sub-zero temperatures without slowly acclimating them to the colder temperatures. So multiple reasons why these mews are so important. They would be in a restricted healing kennel size, which are basically our cat kennels, and those are a standard size for a bird with a fractured wing. And then the mews, the ones that we're looking at building, 3 of them will be like 12 foot wide, 19 foot long, and then one a little bit smaller for the small kestrels and the screech owls that don't need quite as much. It'll give them room to fly somewhat, but not to aggravate any injury any further. And then from there, the flight cage will be adjoined to the mews, so we'll be able to open up a door at one end or the other, and then they'll be able to fly for a couple days. That one will go back into the mews, and then the other animal at the other end will have access to the flight cage. A little over a year ago now, we had 2 squirrel enclosures built, so I did add all of Wisconsin squirrels to our license last year. So when they go from the infant stage inside, they go to a little bit bigger cage when they're juveniles, and then they go to the outside cage to get again acclimated to the weathers outside and things like that. And then also last year we had 2 duckling enclosures. We do a couple hundred ducklings a year. Basically they again fall through the storm drains, or people think that the mom is not around and they bring them into us. Again, make sure that mom is not around before you bring in the babies. They're not always considered orphaned. Mom is usually there somewhere. But we have 2 new duckling enclosures, so we're able to house them outside. They're able to go into the grass during the daytime and then back up into the enclosure with a pond and a heated area for the nighttime. Ducklings do have to learn how to swim. They actually can drown. Many people don't know that. They are not waterproof. Their feathers are not waterproof when they're born. So they go underneath the mom to collect oil off of her feathers to become waterproofed. So while they're here and we don't have the mom to give them the waterproofing, it naturally comes to them, but they have to be introduced to the water slowly to build up that oils on their feathers. A couple years ago, I got my permit to overwinter bats. We do all of the bat species in Wisconsin. When they first come in the winter time, they're usually lacking in their nutrition. So I do a mixture of flaxseed oil and vitamins and like milk bones, so they get the calcium and different vitamins and everything, and do a mixture, and they get that for a few days prior to learning to eat the mealworms throughout the winter. And we hand feed them a couple times a week until they learn that bats, as a lot of bird species, will eat while they're flying. so they have to learn how to eat out of a dish. So we have to teach them how to eat out of a dish. So it takes quite a few feedings before they figure out, and then it's just adding the food to the dish. We do have a couple different vets on our wildlife license, so I always want to thank them for helping with the wildlife. If one is not available, I go to the other, or different species with different vets, whatever they're most comfortable helping with. So they go in, they get x-rays if they need pain medication or eye drops. We've had some birds with eye issues. We get eye drops for them. Otherwise, they help with mostly the x-rays and just the overall exam, helping with exam for any injuries. The raptors, if they have a wing injury, once they're in we'd have them in the mews and that, we would go in and actually do stretch out and release their wings or their joints. And sometimes in between being wrapped, we'll unwrap them and stretch out the wings so that they don't become, stiffened in that one position. Hopefully that everything that we get in will be able to be released. We do work with a couple places. If we do get some non-releasable animals in, there's a couple sanctuaries that, example, I had a couple ducks, one with a partial wing, that they just allow them to live out their life in the sanctuary with the other ducks that are non-releasable. An owl will go on for an education program that had an eye injury. Some can be released with one eye, some can't, depending on the species or the severity of the injury. So I always look for another source prior to making the decision of euthanasia. So if we're able to allow them to live out their life in another fashion, we certainly do that. I have always loved the wildlife, just being out and enjoy watching it, first of all, but the release, getting them back out there. See, make me teary. Getting them back out there. Yeah.
That's so cool. We love you, Kathy.
We love you all.